Welcome everyone here today, from all ages, those in their teens, 20s, 30s plus, people of African descent, Arab descent, European descent, those who identify as Hispanic, Latin, and people indigenous to this land. Also, people of all genders, which include women, men, transgender, or others. Neurodivergent, neurotypical, gay, lesbian, bisexual, heterosexual, pansexual, queer, or others whom none of the labels fit. Lastly, people with different faiths, religious traditions, faith practices, private practices, agnostics, atheists, and seekers. Welcome all. So, part of the reason why we are here today is to share with you an exciting project that myself and my colleagues have been working on for the last 4 months. My name is Marlon, and I'm joined here today with Carolina, Saraya, Josh, Warami, James, of course, and also a few others that weren't able to be with us here today. We always keep them within our thoughts. And now it's a great opportunity for me to introduce you guys to what was the main question in terms of the anchor around what we were trying to do throughout this action research process. So the anchor of this, the whole research and what we wanted to do was based around this one question, which was taking into consideration our individual and collective lived experiences. How might we transition towards a just regenerative food system? So I would actually like to invite you guys to actually ponder on this particular question and perhaps write down any thoughts, anything you feel that is something that would aid in answering this question, because this is a big part of our research process. And what we'll do is that your responses will be collected by one of my colleagues at some point during the event and will be placed on the whiteboard. We'll look back on this towards the end of the presentation, which will be nice as well, just to see what your thoughts were. And we'll obviously be opening up a discussion on this. So now I would like to pass over to my colleague Carolina, who will actually be going through with you what is Participatory Action Research, because I'm sure you might have some questions in your head around that. But yes, Carolina.
So, with the question that you have in here, which is taking into consideration your individual or our individual and collective lived experience, how might we transition towards a just and regenerative food system? In action research, reflection is very important. So for 4 minutes, please, for people that are in Zoom and for people that are present here, how would you respond to this question? Or what questions would you ask that question? So take 4 minutes and maybe close your eyes at the beginning, or just without thinking, what are the first words that come into your mind? Okay? So 4 minutes. We'll time it. So, as we always say, pencils up and start. Write whatever words come into your mind. Anything. shorter. But reflection, as I said, and moments of silence and moments of just going into our bodies and seeing where like our thoughts are taking us in an individual way first, and then sharing it and seeing what comes, like how we complement each other, how we differentiate each other is part of how this process has been for us. We are all from different backgrounds. We come from different parts of the world. We're neurotypical, we're neurodivergent group, and we all work now at Feedback, which is an environmental organization that focuses in the food system. And we all are part of a project of a program called EcoTalent. EcoTalent, what tries to do is look for opportunities for young people from different backgrounds, again from different identities, and give them a space and provide them with job opportunities in the food and environmental sector in the UK. Because as other organizations and Feedback, we've seen that there is a lack of diversity and there is a lack of young people in the sector. So EcoTalent, what it tries to do is to provide paid internship opportunities for young people that don't have to have a degree in environmental careers or education. They just have to be passionate and have some interest in food or in the environment. And these are some of the young people that have been part of internships with host organizations that are part of this. So we're here Feedback, but this is a broader systemic change in a way, very small, but very, very transformative. And part of EcoTalent, what we wanted to do is go a little bit deeper into how young people, what would they look at, what would they focus on if they would have the opportunity to change the food system, like where would they look at? And that's been our 4 months. Just the start. We could go and we will go much deeper, but I'll explain first. I don't know who knows what Participatory Action Research is, but it's a very, very transformative methodology, and I'll read one of the many definitions that there are. It's a methodology that aims to decolonize knowledge. It holds the everyday knowledge of action researchers at the center of the process and views it as equal as to expert knowledge. PAR, as its acronym, is structured in cycle of action and reflection. By moving between the two, researchers are generating new knowledge and use the knowledge to further their collective goals. So again, reflection, and this is part, like being here is part of the action that we're doing. So we're still doing part with you, and now you're part of that process with us. And so, the mother question that you just looked at was our beginning. And from there, new questions emerge, new focuses emerge through drawing, through poetry, through reflective writing, through various creative methodologies. We went and dig deep into ourselves and as a group. And what you will be seeing today here is some of the outcomes and some of the processes that came out. And so I'll pass the word to all of you. You made this possible. So yeah. We'll start with Romy, that storytelling was really important in this process. And so some stories came up, and yeah, we'll take you through.
Thank you, Caroline. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. How are we feeling? Good. Lovely. Now we're entering the value of stories. Central to the PARC process we undertook was storytelling, and we looked at it through a framework called the public narrative, according to Marshall Gans, and it's a way of harnessing the power of story to the work of leadership in 3 ways: the story of us, the story of self, and the story of now, as you can see over there. The first story, the story of self, we're going to take the first bite of the apple. Like every other story, there's a moment of challenge, and a moment the protagonist is confronted with a choice, and then the moment of outcome. But what makes the heart of the plot is how we share those moments to help understand why we've been called to do what we're doing. Not by the titles on our resume or the colleges we went to or anything, but by our values. What has called us the difference that we want to make in the world. You may not want to talk about your story or yourself, but if you don't claim authorship of your story, others will tell it for you. And that's something that Chimamanda Adichie terms the dangers of a single story. And you may not like how they tell it because it's not theirs to tell, it's your story. Leadership is about vulnerability, and bringing into account of your story makes it authentic. You can't learn from perfect people. And my personal story that birthed my values of the food system began with my moment of challenge, when I realized as an agriculture student and grower, both basic and institutionalized knowledge of the food and agriculture system was a bit blindsided in favor of conventional bread practices, high-end food shopping outlets which don't really reflect the true cost of food. Lack of inclusivity, diversity in job opportunities, which creates a certain kind of stereotype that I'm sure we're all aware of, as well as lack of knowledge of the food and agricultural contributions to climate change. This was long after being conditioned to thinking as a future farmer, application of the right amount of fertilizer in the soil was enough to do something about climate change and was sustainable enough. And as a shopper, I was not naive by contributing to the problem with my religious high-end shopping outlets and practices. This was my challenge. And at the realization of these challenges, we're confronted with a choice, a call to leadership, a purpose, by seeking opportunities for change, one of which we found through PARC, organized by Feedback Global, which brings us to the second bite of the apple, the story of us. This is a collective story, shared purposes, goals, visions of a community, and in our case, this community was PARC with Feedback. Together, we are a group of youth who got into this work because we are victims of a dysfunctional food system and climate. We found each other and realized this fight was bigger than just one of us, and we needed each other to win this fight. The experience of bringing alive the values that we share and moments of sharing this experience is the story of us. It's not divided into margins or what are individual problems. It's the ability to share these problems and share these values in PARC. We may be fighting different wars, but we're fighting the same battle of the broken food system. And now you're also part of the story of us, as we are all experiencing these shared moments and values. So welcome, and thank you. Now, the final apple that we're going to eat is the story of now. This is different. This is a moment to plot because there's an urgency. We are faced with the challenge of a broken food system affecting mankind in numerous ways. We have to locate sources of hope, one of them being COP26, one of many. So COP26 is just one of the outlets of hope that can open a pathway to action so we can choose action in this moment where we're confronted with a need and opportunity to act. And that's the public narrative, tailored to the needs of the food and agricultural system. It's a framework that was created by Marshall Gans, and I employ everyone here to take a look at it and tailor it to any problematic system that you may face, because it's a really good way of finding a solution to problems. Story of us, the story of self, and the story of now. And now I will hand it to Soraya, who's going to share her own story and her collective story of us, now, and self. Thank you.
Cool. Hi everyone. So I just before I get going, want to invite everyone to just take a second to think of a story that they have heard in their life that has really impacted them. Maybe this story inspired you to do something you otherwise wouldn't have done. Maybe this story changed your opinion on something. But just take a moment to have a think about that. Okay, and I want you guys to keep having this in mind throughout the session. So, what's so great about stories is that we can choose how we want to tell them. Be it through a novel, a play, a dance, a circus performance, or a piece of art. The unique ways in which we can tell our stories are what makes them so uniquely ours. When it comes to the climate crisis, it is so easy to lump in all human experiences into one. When it comes to the climate crisis, too many stories are erased. The stories that are erased are the stories that most urgently need to be told, that need a seat at the table and aren't being given one. And this is definitely something we are seeing happening right now at COP, with people who should be getting representation, not, and often the people that are the ones polluting being the ones with the seats at the table. The truth is that we need to be intersectional when tackling this crisis, because all our journeys and experiences are different. Some of us hold more power than others, and some of us are going to be and are already being hit the worst by the climate crisis. And this is why hearing individual stories is so important. It helps us to humanize this, and it helps us to both see our similarities and our differences to one another, and how we can come together to share the power more evenly, decolonize knowledge, and make the planet better for all. So with that in mind, I'm going to share my own story of my personal experience with the food system, and I'm going to express it through poetry, and as Rory said, I'm going to follow the story of self, us, now format, so you guys can get an idea what it looks like. And you will notice it is a very we think about a lot of the stories we've heard, it's very common to see them in this narrative, and there's a reason why. Okay. Growing up, when it came to food, options were overflowing. Strawberries, steak, lamb kebabs, avocados. Not once did I think about where they were growing, unknowingly contributing to the planet's deterioration, pouring gasoline on the fire for Earth's cremation. Growing up, when it came to food, I didn't realize the other side of the world was on my doorstep. Swore I couldn't go a day without meat, a carnivore, repeatedly pouring lashings of gravy on my prey, filling fridges like I was prepping for doomsday. A web of lies that I didn't even realise I was a part of. Growing up, when it came to food, every Christmas, my church had the children fill shoeboxes with food for the poor. I didn't think it through that one day a year doesn't fix world hunger. Both young and old, too deluded, endorsing our saviour complexes to conclude that a plaster wraps up a wound, but not its source. Almost grown up, when it came to food, I started to ask questions. One day, as meat entered my intestines, I found myself feeling thrown. A mask glued onto me was peeling off as I realised I was eating a goat. Pritt stick wasn't strong enough to stop me seeing that this meat digesting in me once bleated, had a heart that beated. So why had I been taught to separate meat and animal as though they were two? Grown up, when it comes to food, I see things as they really are. Pritt stick isn't strong enough to sew up a system so scarred that it was made to fail. Too decayed to locate the root of the problem, too betrayed by billionaires, too afraid to derail their egos to be eco-friendly, driving in their Bentleys while Earth struggles to exhale. We've been failed. Grown up, when it comes to the food system, options are running out. There's no doubt that now is the time for us to come together, to call out politicians who can't even pretend to care enough to open their eyes and see how the West have looted and polluted indigenous lands, how they hide voices that need to be heard. Now is the time to take a stand, to read through their lives, because words without action are as empty as forests without trees, and performatively tossing some coins in a fountain speaks more volumes than the food transferred into landfills. Now is the time not to cower, but to fight an uphill battle that we cannot afford to lose. Now is the time to take back the power before our planet becomes a bomb site. In the words of Greta, now is not the time for any more blah blah blah. Now is the time to do what's right before the door closes and we are immersed in eternal night. Okay, thank you. So the final thing I was just going to say is I'd like to encourage everyone, maybe later today or in the next week or so, to have a go at writing your own story. So following this pattern of the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now, because I think the more that we start coming together with our individual experiences, the more we're going to understand that this is a crisis that needs to be tackled through intersectional action. Okay, great. I'm going to pass back to Warren.
Thank you, Soraya. I'm now going to tell you about emotional engagement and storytelling, how it's linked. This is just to give you some context before getting to the tea of climate change and food justice. Naturally, we as humans react out of habit. I'm sure we know that. Which is why emotional engagement is very important. It creates mindful actions, using what we value to move us to engage challenges proactively instead of distancing ourselves from them. Emotional information is not childish, but it's critical information to understand ourselves and the world and how to operate in it. The challenge of the food system and climate change requires intentional, mindful actions, and storytelling is a creative and powerful tool in bringing about mindful actions. Storytelling is a key creative and powerful tool, as it draws on our emotions and shows our values in action. It helps us feel what matters, as opposed to passively doing everything, rather than just thinking about it and telling others what we feel. Because stories allows us to express our values not just as abstract principles, but as lived experiences. They have the power to move others. If you think about the things that register with you the most, if you just reflect, you find out that it's likely due to the story. Growing up, how you knew about your uncles, your aunt, or things that happened in your parents' past is through a story they've told you. Like, oh, let me tell you about that time, that storytelling. When knowledge of the climatic situation and food system is shared through experiences, we tend to, one, identify with the protagonist in the story. Then when we do that, we internalize some of the emotions that they feel, and these emotions could be the fear, the agony, the hurt, even the joy. And some of these emotions that are evoked when we experience them, we gain the emotional resources needed to be choiceful, agentic human beings in our efforts. So it becomes like our power, it becomes in our subconscious, it becomes something we have. When we have those emotions, we know when to choose, what to choose, and what is right. This is the process of storytelling. You can't really piece together what is being said or what is meant to be until you've heard it from the protagonist, the owner, and the teller of the story. So when you hear stories, you get those emotions that they're feeling, and then you can use that to do whatever action that presents itself when the opportunity arises. Thank you. And now, I'll give to Carolina, who's going to present to you the theme that came out of our research in the POP process.
Through storytelling and through listening and reflecting about our stories, things started to emerge, and that's what I was saying. Like, where would the focus be? And as you can see in the screen, these are some of the things that we started looking at deeper. We saw that there is a lack of education around the food system, that the importance of raising awareness around the food system is important. Mutual education, and this was more around focused in identities, like around racism and ableism in particular. Which then one of the Natalie, who is there, hi Natalie, in Zoom, she looked at more deeper around ableism and the value of neurodiversity. And Shabir and Olamide, who are not with us here, they looked at power and power to the people, and like how we have to that power has to be taken into account, or I don't remember, accountability is the word that comes into my mind. And George, he made us dream of community and food cooperative, and you will hear a manifesto that he will share with you at the end of the session. So yeah, now I'll hand it over to Marlon, who will guide you through the theme of education.
Thank you, Carolina. Yes, so as that was previously mentioned, one of the themes that came about from our findings was a lack of education within the food system. This resonated with me a lot because prior to actually getting involved with working with feedback and obviously with the action research phase, I had very much little knowledge on the food system, simply because maybe the information that was out there, I wasn't seeking it, or maybe it was just something that didn't really pique my interest enough, for me to want to actually deep dive into the research, or just to educate myself a little bit more around this topic. So having the opportunity to be a part of not only working with feedback, but doing the research as well, it helped me a lot with just gaining new knowledge and gaining new information. So with the survey findings, post the research phase, the main question, the main themes that emerged from us was the lack of education and knowledge, but there was an umbrella question from the mother question that was actually introduced to you guys at the beginning of the presentation. and this was what is your reality of the food system, from which we conducted qualitative research through survey questions and also personal interviews to our target audience, which was young people like ourselves, of course. And from these findings, we, as you can see on screen, there are a number of things that I felt that was particularly important, but I would like to focus on one in particular. So 32% do not think of the climate when food shopping, with a trend reason amongst this on the slides, of course, as you can see. I felt this was quite poignant because as young people, sometimes we feel like we don't, there's nothing that we can do to make a little bit of, or to create change. But within ourselves, if we are able to act on something, knowing that we have this new bit of information, and we feel that we can actually make a difference from just something as little as trying to shop more local or organic. I feel like this is quite important for people of our age group. And another thing that I thought that was ironic was when I was doing in-person or just one-to-one interviews, either over the phone, a lot of people would tell me, well, when I explained to them the term the food system, they at first they completely did not understand where I was coming from. But from the responses that we got, 60% of the respondents claimed that the food system directly affected them, which I felt was really ironic. But yeah, I would say from the slides that you can see, it's pretty much glaring that a lot of young people are probably disengaged with linking sort of food with the climate crisis. But not only that, I feel like they feel that there's not much within their capacity that they can do to actually work towards the changes of solving this climate crisis. But there is small things that we can do. As I mentioned, just shopping local or organic. There was another theme actually about price and affordability. So clearly there are budget constraints within this food system because a lot of it just falls out of reach for many people. But again, from the responses that we got, so, I could just say no opinion, for example, clear sort of disengagement there. Don't really consider the climate, as most foods unfortunately exploit the environment. Another thing was many people were quite conscious of, if I do shop more local and or organic, it would help the climate, but people are more concerned more or less on price and also convenience. So this would obviously not create the change that we want sort of long term. But from everything that I've mentioned, from the findings, we was able to create a video, a graphic illustration, and a poetry to express all of these findings. So this leads on to the next part, which I would like to welcome Saraya to actually show a lovely video poem that you guys will have opportunity to see.
Thank you, Marlon. So for me personally, in the past, I felt that I couldn't speak on or access understanding the climate crisis because the way it was taught to me, particularly in school, was so scientific, and I am unbelievably awful at science. Like, I literally put in my physics GCSE that the Earth was the centre of the solar system. Awful. So yeah. So I'm naturally a more creative person, and my brain can struggle to comprehend things when they're explained to me in a heavily scientific way. So through the PAR process, which champions unconventional and creative ways of sharing research, I learned that when it comes to educating people on the climate crisis and decolonising knowledge, we need to discuss the issue on an interdisciplinary level, inviting those with less scientific brains to feel that they can be a part of the narrative too. I also think that this is important so that people can kind of share their own lived experiences in the way that works best for them to do so. I strongly believe that we should be using all mediums necessary when it comes to getting the word out about the climate crisis. So this way, as many people as possible can learn about and inform others about what is going on. So with that in mind, I took our survey responses, not all of them, because that was a lot, but some of them, and tried to kind of represent them as accurately as possible, and I've put them in the form of a poem. So yeah, we're going to play that video now.
The UK food system is
not the best. Difficult to acquire quality baked goods, even bread.
There's a huge variety of food groups available.
Easy to access, but not the most sustainable.
The UK food system is
Fast food.
Meat and dairy is too mass produced. Needs to be reduced.
Artificial elements have been introduced.
the UK food system is
Tesco's,
Morrison's,
Aldi,
And Waitrose.
unnecessary waste, throwing out food, grown on the other side of the world,
Factory produced.
Some say the UK food system is well structured and fairly efficient.
Looks okay.
Fair,
Versatile.
decent,
there's something for everyone.
roast dinner,
Mashed potato.
vast, abundant.
everything is fast.
To the question, does the UK food system need to change?
Amongst the range of responses lurked the following selection.
Not really, no.
Not necessarily.
N.A.
Not too fussed about it. The UK food system is
High quality, good value.
wide variation.
Views on the UK food system have been spoken.
The truth is that the UK food system is broken. The global food system is responsible for 30% of greenhouse gases.
It's time for the people of the UK to gather in masses to say that it's not okay.
That every year 8 million tons of plastic waste escapes into the oceans. And that's just from coastal nations. We can't be patient. We need to make waves and put them into motion.
Campaign against food poverty.
Shop local.
Seasonal.
Sustainable. Eat less meat. Be vocal. Let's stop our planet from ending up in the morgue. For more info on what you can do, visit feedbackglobal.org.
Yeah, that was really powerful. Now I'd like to pass over to Warami, who will be sharing with you her takes on oppression within the food system.
I'm here to educate you on some things about the food system. And I don't know what your views on the food system might be, but this is mine. The bricks in front of you represent the food system, or the broken food system, as you can see. And the ones at the top front that has local, organic, sustainable, compensated farmers, and so on, represent many topics of concern which also offer solutions. The local here represents the short food supply chains. From our findings, we find that 19%, just 19, of the participants think about the farmers' efforts towards the food grown when they go shopping. And this is possibly and likely resulting from the disconnected relationship between farmers and consumers due to longer supply chains. The short supply chains that I'm talking about here is like farmers markets, organic stores, box schemes, collection points, and such. And they're really important because they offer many sustainable benefits, but I'm going to describe the three main that is usually discussed in literature, and evidently so. The first one is social sustainability, and this is important because it restores the relationship and connectivity between the small-scale farmer or the producer and the consumer, and enhances trustworthiness. There's assurance and traceability of food. You actually know who grows your food and where it comes from, and there's no better joy than having the assurance of your food was grown sustainably, your food came from here, came from this person. And definitely if anything's wrong with it, you could always go back and like, hey, what's wrong with this? And the second one is economic sustainability. This is by ensuring when a purchase takes place, a noble amount of the dividend goes back to the farmer and the producer for their efforts. They're properly compensated, and it's usually reflected through a premium pricing on the product, which is why when you go to these short food supply chains, you find that the prices are somewhat higher than the conventional prices, but you're paying for the sustainable efforts that are being put into the food that's being grown. And the third sustainability is environmental sustainability, and this is by encouraging the farmers and producers who use sustainable improving systems like agroecological, organic, biodynamic growing practices that attempt to combat climate change and soil degradation. They also involve short travel distances, which we term food miles. So they have shorter food miles, which is reducing the amount of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere compared with food traveled far and wide just to satisfy the non-seasonal cravings of consumers. Culturally appropriate here in the context is representation of culture and beliefs in food, such as accessibility of halal food, which is very important. Food from different cultures being affordably grown here in the UK as opposed to transported from miles away and dried and stored. The UK has a diverse amount of, people from different cultures, different parts of the world, so it's a bit isolating if all we can see is just a certain type of food being grown, being available at schools, being available at places. So the people that have the power to change that, we're trying to hold them responsible as to why people can have culturally appropriate foods in places where food is being provided for people. Diversity in the terms here is the diversity of crops in the soil. And this is for soil conservation purposes, as opposed to intensive monocropping, which is usually profit-driven. You crop like a whole large plot of land with one particular variety or type of crop like wheat and barley, and the rotation is very limited. Then suddenly you have like grass layers or something to attempt to restore back to the soil, but it's not enough. It's not enough, especially for the urgency that we have, the urgency of need. And diversity here within the food system is also the labor, the shift from the stereotype and to see more representation. I'm drawn to where I find myself. If I go to a local market and I don't see someone or something that represents me, I would shy away, definitely. And it's also part of my story. If I go to a place where I can't find the foods I eat, the foods I like, and people who look like me selling the food, and that goes for every one of us here, not just me, I wouldn't want to go there because I don't feel it's inclusive enough, it's representative enough. And that's one of the broken problems of the food system that we need to change. Inclusivity here is the fight for equity, not equality, equity, meaning providing the necessity per person, what they need within the food system. This is people with disabilities, neurodivergent people. We can't ignore them even within the food and agricultural system. We have to create spaces for them and accommodate whatever needs arise. The more people we exclude from the food and climate agenda, the less contributions towards the change. It's issues that are affecting us all, and so we all deserve a voice and an opportunity to contribute. The rain, the sun, the snow, it falls on us all. So the food should fall on us all as well. Here, with these issues and solutions offered, and many, 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 many more, at the steps towards the systemic change. These are matters of urgency, and we can't just depend on the policymakers to turn it around. We can't wait. We don't even have the power from their end to make that, so we can start the change from the ground up. Let's build the road to systemic change. Let's build the consciousness from the ground up. Thank you.
Thank you, Rami. Yeah, that's really important stuff there. And just to echo that, I feel that as consumers, we all have the conscious decision to actually see how we can reverse the effects of, the effects of the problems that's going on within the climate. And this obviously starts from where we shop for our food. So I just wanted to pinpoint that because it's quite important throughout our research and giving people the agency, so putting the power back into the hands of the consumer. Because at the end of the day, if we continue to shop at the mainstream supermarkets, then of course they would feel that there's no reason for us, or there's no reason for change to occur, because again it's all based on a supply and demand sort of basis. So leading on to this, I would like to show a video which illustrates a lot of the points that was mentioned by Rami. And just to echo again that as consumers we all have a choice, and it's based on the choices that we make. We can either be helping the causes towards improving our climate, or we're actually contributing to the disasters that's going on at the moment. So without further ado, I would like to show you the video. Thank you very much.
This is quite cheap. It looks like a bargain, but there must be a catch. Are these good for me?
If I buy my potatoes from the organic store, I feel like it might be more nutritious, but I'm not sure. But these potatoes from the supermarket are within my budget. The mainstream supermarkets value profit over the planet. We have the power to make change, and it starts from those of us who can choose the right potatoes.
So this, the animation video you just watched was narrated by myself, that's Surreal, and yeah, it's just really, we really wanted to highlight a lot of the points we've been discussing, and just making sure that we're hitting the message, hitting the nail on the head about giving consumers that power and giving us, making sure that we're making the right choices to help this help towards reversing the impacts in the climate crisis. So as you've seen, the food system is connected to many other systems of change, systems of hope, and also to other systems of oppression. One of the topics that one of the researchers looked at was her experience as a neurodivergent person in the food sector. With her story, her process, she has made an experience that shouldn't. She was involved in an experience that shouldn't really have happened within the workplace, and we see that there's an opportunity for change within within the food system. So Natalie, who you will hear from, wants to share her story, and we will get that played for you in the next slide.
One thing that please take a breather in a way that is necessary. Natalie's story is really powerful, so also, and it's like a transition towards another mindset. So yeah, thank you for like, as you are seeing, like there's a lot of information here. So in a way, we also want to take care of you and of us, because everything that we're hearing, we've been speaking for the last months. So we're like getting everything in one go. But yeah, so 1 second, if you need, move a little bit, take a breather, and for the people in Zoom also. Yeah, we'll now hear Natalies Story, who is here with us in Zoom. So thank you, Natalie, for telling your story, for sharing it, for being an advocate. She is really inspiring, and I'm really happy that you will be able to listen to her. So, yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Because of a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge. It was an ableist mindset that caused this instance. I was on Facebook when I saw an advert for an internship placement on a livestock farm. I remember the advert being targeted specifically towards young adults who don't get into mainstream work, or who feel that work isn't as accessible to them as it is to others. In other words, this ad was addressing vulnerable young adults with little or no experience in the workplace. This applied to me, as I am an autistic 20-something-year-old who struggles with anxiety disorder and depression, and I have never been employed before. The intern role would include 3 full days a week working on a livestock and vegetable growing farm, shadowing staff members and completing tasks. The host company feedback was employing me as their intern, and they sent me to the farm who they were partnered with, who agreed to take interns in feedback. I was interviewed by my manager at feedback, and the person who would be my manager on the farm. I expressed my feelings about my autism diagnosis, and I mentioned autism a number of times during the interview process. Everyone was aware of my neurological condition, and I was happy that I was as transparent as I could be, with full disclosure, so there was no confusion going forwards. I got the job, my first job. I was ecstatic. I was so proud I could burst. I've been to job interviews in the past and been told that I'm not fit for work because my autism will get in the way of me doing a good job. It's ableism at its finest. Looking back, what should have happened at this point is a meeting with my farm manager to discuss what I needed to have put in place so that I could do the best job that I could do. We needed to discuss accommodations and adjustments so that my workplace was accessible to me as someone with a disability. This would have met the criteria of the Equality Act. What actually happened is that I was told what day I should arrive for my first full day of work and at what time. I had an anxiety attack that morning in my car, and I didn't even make it to the gates. First red flag. I ignored and brushed away all the things that made me uncomfortable and upset, and I settled it in my brain as this was just part of work, and I just had to get on with it. My own ignorance and internal ableism let me down. The last straw for me was an incident that happened while I was working. I was struggling with my mental and physical health during this time, and I was physically and mentally exhausted. I was struggling to complete the simplest of tasks. One of my colleagues got frustrated at me and was shouting at me and telling me to go home because I don't work hard enough. I had an autism meltdown in the car park of the farm. A meltdown for me means getting on the floor, becoming non-verbal and unable to communicate effectively, rocking back and forth, crying, hyperventilating, screaming, punching my legs, flapping my hands,
pinching my wrists, kicking. There is a lot. My farm manager didn't know what to do. She did everything you're not supposed to do to someone having autism help. She grabbed my wrists. She told me I can't behave this way. She threatened to call an ambulance if I done something. This terrified me. If an ambulance crew came, they would have not known what was wrong with me, and they would have got the police involved because I would have been uncooperative. The police would have restrained me and hurt me. They could have sectioned me, and they could have taken me to a mental health facility and detained me. This is a very true and very real possibility. A meltdown can look terrifying to someone who doesn't understand what's going on or know what to do, and I understand and respect that. I should have done more to protect my welfare, my needs, and my rights, but I didn't understand my rights at the time and what the law entitled me to. The farm manager should have done more to make sure that my needs and rights were met. Unfortunately, this isn't an isolated incident. More than half of all autistic adults are unemployed because the workplace is inaccessible to us. Our needs are not met, and it isn't safe for us. Even though there are laws that are meant to be protecting us, not enough is done to enforce these legislations. I have chosen to share my story to show that we are far from equity and inclusion within the food system. Jobs in the food industry are not accessible to everyone, and this is a major problem, especially because the food industry can also benefit from employing autistic individuals, people of minority communities, and disabled people. It's not only us who will benefit from being accepted into the food system. I propose that we use a clearer, detailed document to help enforce the legislation, the Equality Act 2010 properly and fairly, so that companies, managers, and employees understand completely what their rights are, what disabled employees are entitled to, and how to have their rights enforced. I call this proposal the PIE Plan. It stands for Personal Inclusion and Equity Plan. I believe that all businesses, companies, and workplaces who employ autistic people and disabled people should implement this plan and use it to help make sure that the workplace is accessible, safe, and welcoming to disabled and vulnerable employees. The PIE Plan is not yet in legislation, but it would greatly help make following the legislation easier and a smoother process. It would benefit not only disabled people, but it will also benefit companies and managers who want to employ disabled people, because it helps with understanding individuals' needs and accommodations, and how to implement those adjustments. If all businesses and companies use the PIE Plan as an aid to ensure that the rights, needs, and accommodations are met for vulnerable and disabled people in the food system and the workplace, more disabled people will be employed and have a fairer opportunity for the same jobs as neurotypical and non-disabled people. Companies and businesses would benefit greatly from knowing how to accommodate disabled people so that there is a greater diversity in the workplace, as well as unique perspectives and ideas. Different ways of thinking equal sufficiency.
So thank you, Natalie, for being there. I'm looking if I see a chat from her, but I can't see her, but she's there. Thank you, Natalie. I'll read a letter that she wrote to the neurotypical community. I'll hand it over when the presentation is over. You're here with me, Natalie, so thank you. To the neurotypical society, it is important to me that my voice be one of importance. A voice that is not only heard, but one that is able to create change. It is important to me because I speak not just for myself, but for a whole community who are having to fight to be listened to. We are not the burden that society has labeled us. We are not just your list of stereotypes. We are hope for a better future. We are an example of unlocked potential. We are held back by society because you think differently to us, and that scares you. You don't understand us. We are a minority, and that scares you. I am here to tell you that it is okay to be afraid. But it is not okay to turn that fear into hate, anger, or prejudice. Take your fear, embrace it, and understand it. Overcome it and use it to learn, to educate yourself. Use your fear as a tool to integrate yourself into our world. We deserve better. Don't push us away. Don't exclude us from your social circle or your games in the playground. Don't make fun of us and call us names. Don't prevent us from accessing the same jobs, roles, and dreams as you. We can do everything you do and more. We just do it differently. It is not about what we are lacking. It's about the tools that society is lacking to accommodate our neurodivergent minds, to help us be integrated. We have charities, legislation, and some people in power fighting for equity rights and inclusion. But there are not enough actually autistic people standing up to be heard. And we are not using our voices loud enough. So I am standing up for all autistic people. I will use my voice to make this world more accessible to us, so we can have all the freedoms, rights, and choices that allistic have. We don't want awareness and equality. We want acceptance and equity. We want a world where we don't have to exhaust ourselves masking to be allistic social expectations. We want a world where we can communicate naturally and steam openly without criticism and judgment. We want a world that doesn't cause sensory overloads and shutdowns. We demand mutual respect within our schools and workplaces, by our peers and within society as a whole. We demand recognition of our capabilities, a recognition of the fact that we do not lack certain desirables found in allistic behavior and thinking. We just display our emotions in a different way, and our logistical thought patterns are different to allistics. Therefore, unrelatable, which is exactly what society fears, the unknown. We are not the first minority community to have to fight for our rights, and we won't be the last. The battles are ongoing and seem to be indefinite, but the world should not be this way. No one should have to fight to be treated fairly. There is not enough being done to prevent racism, ableism, and discrimination. But you can do your part in creating a just and equal society. Confronting these uncomfortable truths, openly facing these problems head on by taking and learning is the only way we can eliminate ignorance, which will eliminate fear and in turn eliminate injustice, unfairness, and ableism. So that's the letter from Natalie. And Natalie, she's part of, she brings us to the, already thinking for us. Everyone has already shared some parts of, the issues, but also the solutions. And now I'll pass the word to Maroon, and so that you take us back. And everything, it is broken in the system, but there is hope. And that's what keeps us moving, so yeah.
Thank you. I hope you're not tired of seeing me yet. It's very important that this goes full circle. So when we educate you on one bit that has to do with evoking emotions and consciousness, we also go back to the literal part about climate and food system. So now I'm going to talk to you about constructive anxiety and the consciousness. Some of the emotions evoked from stories of the climate, such as fear or anxiety, can cause a disassociation from people with the topics. And it's worse when people find out that they were unintentionally or intentionally part of the problem, or they realize the reality of the consequences of their actions. But anxiety can be positive, which is what we term constructive anxiety. And sometimes this is necessary in leadership to create enough challenge to shake people out of their habitual way of screening everything out that differs from their natural habits and lifestyle, and gets them into a fresh way of thinking. And this can only be done by a challenge made through emotional anxiety. But how can we create this anxiety that we speak of? The first one is through urgency of need. Urgency of need or opportunity, and opportunity. And creating urgency is a very, very powerful tool for breakthrough. It's the awareness of the food and agricultural contribution to climate change, expressing how our actions can't wait any longer, and we are on a timer, unfortunately. When the opportunity arises, the values instilled in the person, I'm going to take you back to when we said storytelling, and when they internalize those emotions and are equipped with those emotions that they have now, so it's within them. Those values and emotions are the same in this context. When they're equipped with that, the ones that still will hopefully present itself in action when an opportunity arises. Take, for example, the first frame. Here is an example of storytelling where the protagonist or teller of the story meets an individual, obviously with a habitual way of thinking, and they have spoken and told a story about the food system, about the climate change and everything. And the act of storytelling here is proposed in order to engage constructive anxiety through the urgency of need, whereby the individual is going through the phases of identifying with the protagonist of the story and internalizing some of the emotions of both, causing them to adapt to the urgency of need, foregoing their habitual thinking for a new, fresh way of thinking, aka the consciousness. Then when the opportunity of need arises for action, like in the second frame, where we see the individual in his home, obviously has not done grocery shopping, been lazy, probably a student like myself. So is the urgency of opportunity has arisen here where he needs to shop. But because he has let that storytelling conversation with the consciousness, it's hovering over him, over his head, and then he starts to think, okay, this is an opportunity, what do I do? And then he's equipped to make the choice, as you see in the third frame, where he finds himself in one of the, we're now going back to the educational bit about the short food supply chain and small-scale farmers. This is one of the chain, the local farmers market. So he finds himself here because obviously he's been equipped with the emotions to make a choice, an intentional choice. And he goes here and sees, the wonky vegetables, the unshaven carrots, the weird-looking aubergines, and some fresh salad bag that probably doesn't have the branding on it or has a different branding to what you know. And then he's able to make a choice there. And this is really important because from our research and interviews I've conducted, I asked a couple people, even those at older ages and the young people, when did you gain your food consciousness? Like, when did you think that, I should probably start shopping differently or eating differently? And it happened to be, a lot of them realized this when they left their parents' house. Like when they decided they were going to live on their own and they had to do their own food shopping. And that's really, representative, and it coincides with what we're talking about, the habitual way and the consciousness. Because then, the habitual way was probably the parents putting whatever they had on the table and you had to eat it because that's what we're eating. Or, when you shop, you go to the high-end outlets and, this is what you're used to. But when you're presented with the opportunity of, I need to shop, it's whatever you have within you, which is why we're trying to pass on these values and these emotions so they're equipped with this when they're faced with the choice to buy from more sustainable, more all-round sustainable, economically sustainable, socially sustainable, and environmentally sustainable outlets of shopping and of food. And the second one is anger. This is the outrage, a reaction. It's the dissonance between the world as it is and as it ought to be. Your anger could be, farmers ought to have fair pay. You should know where your food comes from. There should be diversity in foods. There should be less non-sustainable packaging and accessibility to healthier, more nutritional options. Your food should have traveled less miles. The soil should be more taken care of. This is a very, very crucial dissonance because it creates a tension that can result in action or leading us to be ready to act when the opportunity arises. The third one is hope and self-belief. This is defined by believing in the plausibility of the possible over the necessity of the probable. Most people choose to term themselves realistic. Yeah, I'm just a realist. The air's going to warm up, we're all going to go, so might as well just do what we've been doing. Or unrealistic, we know that leaders are not going to do anything, so might as well just do what we want. Unrealistic, this is what I have, so I really don't think it's worth the effort to go find something more sustainable. But to be realistic is to recognize the probable, which is most likely to happen, doesn't always happen. Sometimes the possibility does. And like Marshall Gantz used the example of Barack Obama, the first black president. I mean, how possible was that? But it was probable and did happen. And a lot of people have this thing as well when it's time to vote, that yeah, my vote probably wouldn't count, so it doesn't really matter, I'm not going to vote. And then the results come out and, the opposition just won by one vote. And it may be probable that it's your one vote that could have, put someone right in the system. I'm not saying that it is, but it's probability. And we cannot leave the probability out of the equation if we want to be realistic. And self-efficacy is the experience that your singular contribution can make a difference. And this is the consumer mindset of their efforts toward climate change will go unnoticed in the grand scheme of things, and they choose not to act. And it's not the best way to go about things. Now, one of the probable that's one of the results from what we've done that you will see after this is Josh's manifesto. This is one of the probability of something good, something realistic, as described, happens. So we're looking towards the probable, not the possible. Now you have personally supported a local farmer, you've contributed to sustainable efforts towards climate change, you can make a difference. YCMAD. So part of the consciousness I want to leave with you is the acronym YCMAD. It should hover over your head in everything you do. Beyond the food system, beyond the climate change, you can make a difference. Then from the research, due to accessibility and affordability issues, a lot of people find that for them, it's not like completely realistic to hop into a complete change in their shopping habits. But one step closer is still a step, and hopefully a new, healthier, more sustainable way to form new, better habits for yourself. And the last slide shows where the individual tries to find a balance in their shopping for fresh food and fruits from these short food supply chains, and finding a balance where shopping for the higher outlets would be possibly their canned food and some other things that you possibly can't get, and other necessities. This is just one of the solutions, and this is just a way to show you that if you wanted to, you will. Many things that you've gotten now is because you really, really, really wanted it. At one point, it didn't seem realistic when you wanted it. So if you really want to do something, you will find a way within your personal resources, because it's always subjective. Today you can get back, tomorrow you can get with 3, the next day you can get with 4. But the fact that you always have a bag from there is the change we're looking for, as long as you're putting in the effort. Because one step closer is a step. So don't choose to do nothing, you can make a difference. And the fourth point is empathy. Empathize with the situation enough to do something. As cliche as it is, love wins. let love lead. If you love something so much, like the climate, the earth, yourself even, because you're within the climate, you're part of the climate, you're part of the earth, if you love it enough, you will do something about it. So now we create challenge to create this capacity for hope, empathy, self-worth that enables us to access the emotional resources we need to respond to the food and climate challenges courageously. Why you can make a difference. Yes, and now Josh is going to come up and give you his manifesto and one of the many solutions towards a just and regenerative food system through a beautiful drawing that he did himself, very talented, very artistic, and the manifesto will be handed to you while he does this.
Here at COP26 with Feedback Global, and this is my manifesto for the one pot community cooperative. This is my for the food system to be more regenerative and communal. Healthy, so where I live, I see lots of homeless people using food banks and not having enough food for themselves or their children. I interviewed how I came to create this pamphlet. I interviewed some family members about the food system. They grew up with, and I learned about that while my great-grandparents, they actually owned a small holding with, they created a lot of food. Really, which was inspiring to me. Hopefully, having a food cooperative in every town. I'd like to see to be loads of to forward this model widely and have food community co-ops in different places, and if there are more empty buildings that councils could free up space for. It means bringing people together. To grow food, to use surplus food. A part of it is doing gleaning and redistributing food to co-ops and cooking it together and taking back power, because waiting for those at the top to help isn't an option, as we all know. Shared work and food. Community work would not be paid in money, it would be planting, growing, creating compost, going and gleaning, foraging, learning from farms and permaculture places. And also maybe making the space tidy. Everyone in the community would sign up to do some work each week. Sometimes there'll be group days. This would be the community would vote for someone to coordinate everything each month. Committee. And this would make change and so the One Pot community is a community that includes everyone, encompasses all like different groups of people, old, young, able, disabled, unemployed, with councils and small and large business donating. I like the idea of cooking big pot of food made from whatever there is left over on that day, and sharing this in the co-op. Eating around the table, so even if you have no food in the house and no money, you can still eat, contribute. There'll be food left to share with the homeless also. One Pot community is a happy place where there's enough food for all. Does anybody want to ask any questions about the cooperative? So, what would the cooperative, can I ask, what would a cooperative look like for you?
Mic, it's if someone wants to answer that question. What would a cooperative look like for you? And how does it relate to Josh's cooperative? Anyone? Yep. I'm sorry.
Thank you for sharing the idea. I think it's wonderful because we're always facing the challenge of cities not being able to grow and break their own food. And, there's these crazy technical solutions of like vertical farms and multi-story farms in cities. But I think a food cooperative is more sensible because there is so much that can be sorted within a community around a food cooperative. And some of the ideas you have there about like how it can be shared, you could address food waste, sense of community ownership around food, which we don't have now. There's only corporate ownership. I've seen some food banks and some kind of like, yeah, I don't know, it's the closest I can imagine to that in terms of what exists now. Food banks are only one way. Well, this is kind of everyone doing something and everyone creating something. I think it's a really excellent idea. And yeah, so thank you for sharing. I think, like, does it exist in places, or is this an idea that's kind of new?
What's a question for you, Josh?
Yes, it's an excellent model, I think. It's in place. It's used in some organisations, but it's not used across that. I think it could start becoming a real thing. Love it, Steve.
Yeah, he leads our utopia, as we say it. Do you have questions? Because, so we're going to open a reflection section, which would be, led by Sarai.
Thank you.
Can I quickly just reflect on something in the chat?
Yeah.
Just on this point for Andre, who works with us on the programme, just related to the point that you made, and with Josh as well, he said, I agree. I love that the people who are benefiting from the One Pop community are also the ones enabling it, and the space to eat together is another space where people can share their stories.
Cool, so thank you so much, Josh, for sharing your manifesto with us. If you haven't already, please do have a read of Josh's manifesto. There are some really brilliant and innovative ideas on that, and I definitely think it's something realistic that could actually happen, and I think there's something so kind of exciting about that, because so often you don't see things enacted that could be. So yeah, thank you so much, Josh. With that, we have reached the end of our presentation. Thank you so much to all of you. We know it has been a lot of information to take in, but hopefully you'll take something away from this. Today, we talked to you primarily about two things. The first is what a PAR process looks like, and how it can be used to gauge the views of everyday people on climate change and our food system. As much as possible, something that we kept saying throughout is it's about giving that power back to the people, because as I mentioned earlier, I don't think we're seeing that happening right now enough at all. Equally, the other thing we've shown you is how the PAR process strives to be an inclusive space in which ideas and information can be presented in radical new ways. We've also talked to you about what our research has taught us about the UK food system and how us young people can make it more just and regenerative, and also people of any ages, a bit like, you know, if we look back to where we started with the diversity welcoming. We need this to be as inclusive as possible in order to make real change and as intersectional as possible. So now what we would like to do is we would really love to hear your thoughts. At the beginning of this session, we asked you to write down any thoughts you have in response to our mother question, which is taking into consideration our individual and collective lived experience. How might we transition towards a just and regenerative food system? So we would love to hear what you wrote on your paper at the start of this session, or if you feel more comfortable to, we're happy to read it out for you. But we'd also just like to hear any thoughts or questions that you have, or whether maybe your thoughts on how we can transition to a just and regenerative food system have changed. So really what I'm trying to say is it's a very open space now to just kind of share any thoughts or questions that you may have. So yeah, anyone got any thoughts or questions? Also, if people want to ask stuff on Zoom in the chat box, that is also an option. Yes. James will pass the mic.
So, I think the answer is our both questions that they're still kind of developing. There's so much in that, and yeah, it was really amazing. Thank you all. Sorry. The question I have is just what happens next with you guys and for the project. I know you've been doing this for 4 months now, and yeah, if you know, shared some of your findings today, what's the next stage of the project?
I'll give you my perspective, and then I will open it up to see if anyone else wants to share. The short answer is not sure. We want to keep kind of continuing this work. So part of what PAR is about is this idea that, you know, the work doesn't stop. So even if the kind of formal, you know, we're going to meet every week thing stops, the work should continue, because we should constantly be learning and adapting and unlearning and relearning. For me personally, I am taking away from this a kind of real passion to spread the word more about what I have learned, but also to learn from others and from their experiences, so I'm going to keep that up. I have radically changed the way I food shop since this process started. I'm definitely going to keep that up as well. But I think we're hopeful that we can kind of, you know, continue doing things. Myself and Warami are presenting at a farming conference in Oxford in January, I believe. So there are going to be bits here and there. Anyone else? Yeah?
So essentially, the PAR process revolves around storytelling and lived experiences. So I'll answer this within that concept. Our stories keep changing. The story of self keeps changing because you experience different things. You cannot stop experiencing until you die. So what's next is just the continuation of your story. When you get new stories, you have a new story of self. If I feel I'm affected in a new way, in a different way, or this develops, my story of self keeps developing, so my story keeps developing. Meaning my story of now will develop again because I find a new community. Story of now is my community, so you find new people or same people with developed story of self, so the community remains, it doesn't end. Your story of us rather, the story of now, which is the action phase, will also change because it's a cycle. The story of self has changed, story of now has changed or developed, and then the story of now, the action phase will change. So each action, just like COP26 was this story of now, Oxford is another story of now. Other opportunities to share this will be different stories of now. So what's next is we keep telling my story. And we want you to keep telling your story. That's what's next for you, that's what's next for us. So it's just as our lived experiences keep developing and keep changing, the process keeps changing, the cycle keeps moving, so it doesn't stop. Once you start, you can't stop. Which is why I'm so glad you're here today and we've told you, because you can't stop now. You literally can't stop. Yeah, so that's what this is about, the power process.
Thank you, Laura. Does anyone else have any thoughts that they want to share on that? No? No? Okay. Yes.
Couple of things. Your manifesto was brilliant, and it really helps to answer what I really struggle with is how we increase access to both healthy, just, sustainable food. It's that I feel like often just access to food and access to sustainable food is like different issues, but this cultural approach really helps to kind of bring that together to create a really sustainable and just food system that supports everyone. So really cool. I really love that. I want to share that with everyone. My question to you is, I was really quite surprised about the apathy with your survey to young people. Was it just young people, the survey about the food system?
No, it was a real range. I think the oldest was 75 and the youngest was 10.
Okay, so I was quite surprised at the apathy or the kind of disconnect people seem to climate and food. And I would just kind of want to ask you how you're going to take this forward to try and spread the word, to show that connection and to go forward with this project.
Yeah, thank you. That's another really, really good question. You're right, there was a lot of apathy, and sadly, I don't know about the others, I wasn't too surprised. There was also this big attitude of kind of, I think you might have seen it on one of the slides, like, oh, well, there's nothing to be done, what are we going to do? Kind of defeatist attitude as well, coming across. I think I don't know if you guys have heard this before, but often there's a process of calling people out, and I think the best thing to do is to call people in. Because when we call people out, we anger them, we alienate them, and we don't achieve anything. So I think the solution is going to be calling people in, and you know, it does just start with conversations, with talking to people, with not coming across in a way that you're being judgy. And that's something personally I'm constantly, like I went vegan like a year ago, and I'm constantly trying to figure out how to talk about it in a way that doesn't piss people off or make them feel judged. And I'm constantly trying to, you know, figure out how do you share your own experiences in a way that doesn't call people out and calls them in instead and makes them feel listened to and heard. So I think, from my perspective, the solution is just having those conversations. If you feel comfortable to and you feel that you have the energy to, I think that's going to be kind of the best way forward. Yeah, anyone else?
Yeah, so just to echo what Surya was saying, I think it's important not to be too sort of judgmental, because people have their own ingrained habits, and you can't just thrust your own sort of ways like to people. So I think, as Surya was saying, having like small conversations with people, getting them to sort of open up their mind and say, look, there are better alternatives out there. It's just a case of more or less educating yourself, being more self-aware, because if you're more self-aware, then you can actually pull on those external resources and just think, okay, I can plug into this, and this might help me towards, you know, making those positive changes, you know, in your own personal life. But you're also helping the environment, so it doesn't just benefit yourself, because them choices that you're making, those conscious decisions you're making, you're improving your own personal well-being, but at the same time, you're helping the planet. So I feel like, yeah, the more we can just teach, the way we can spread the word is through those small conversations we have with people, but without trying to impose ourselves too much onto people, because then that's when people might just go, oh, I don't want to listen to you, you're being a bit too, maybe, I don't use the term aggressive, but I would say more passionate. Some people, they take the passion as a bit of they take it the wrong way sometimes, so it's nice to be subtle with your approach and everything, but me personally, I just feel, in terms of, this is more or less like a call to leadership, so people kind of like people do watch what you're doing. Technically, you might feel, oh, no one's really taking notice, or I'm doing this just for myself, but people actually they'll see the differences in the way that you're living, and they might be curious, oh, how come I noticed you start shopping here, or, I could just mention to someone, oh, I've recently tried to change my diet, and so, oh, tell me more about it. And again, from these conversations, we can open up the space really, and then, we can start to see real changes emerge. But that's really my take on it. If anyone on the stage.
I think you can show them. I think it's really, conversations do go a long way. I've had conversations with people and they're like, oh, that's really interesting, because they've never heard it from this perspective, so they're going to start trying it. But I also think you can show them, because I've tried it. I've had many conversations with friends of mine about, eating and farming and, my lifestyle. Always trying to find an organic store near me or a local farmer, agroecological way that they're growing their food, just to make sure, or even as small as shopping from my local off-license, because I'm socially and environmentally helping him, as opposed to putting my money into long chains that I know is not going to go back. So I think it's about being intentional. You have to really analyze who you're speaking to and try to target the ways to speak to them. It's about using what you have as well. If you can cook, you love to cook with these things and show them that it can be tasty and it can be good. And there's like, really, I never knew that, aubergines could be this good, or I never knew this could be, I love to cook, and that's how I've had, really colonize my family and my friends to get them to eat healthier and to be more conscious, because you know that, yeah, if I cook this like this, I can eat it, but naturally, because it's not in their habit or what they know or like, they will shy away from it. But when you show them that there are ways to incorporate it to your lifestyle, then it's easier for them. So show them in little ways, carry them along, just be authentic, because it's you. You don't have to bend just because they didn't. Show them that there is a way, and you can do it this way. If you don't like it this way, do it that way. So have conversations, but put the action as well. Remind them that, oh, there's this off license right here. Why don't we, it's even closer, why don't we just go here, do this, let's go to the African market, local market, African market, Middle Eastern market, let's try this, let's try that, let's pay for this, and from habitual things, when you start doing it, it becomes easy. It's all psychology. People think it's literally about the, just the science of it, but everything starts from psychology, because that's how we're made. So show them, talk about it and show them in different ways. And through your poetry, through your art, and through your drawing, or whatever way, dance, whatever way you can, just be intentional and be authentic.
Carolina, did you have, no? Okay. Just a final thought on that. I also think we can't underestimate the power of social media. I quite often just do Instagram stories, and again, it's not about coming across as preachy, it's just about speaking the truth in a way that kind of calls people in and invites them to have all the facts and then decide what they want to do with them. So I think a lot of it as well is like, how can I don't know, do an Instagram story about this, or can I tweet about this, or how can I amplify the voices that we're not hearing enough through my social media as well, and like, I think that's also a really important thing to think about. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one in the chat, but I think Christine, you have one?
Yeah, what are we talking about?
We've got about 10 minutes more, and we're going to do a very quick change over the time, because we started a bit later.
I was just going to ask, having gone through, or still going through the PAR process, and you talked about COP not being quite exclusionary and not participating
Good question. I think the power should be with the people at COP. I don't think, the problem is at the moment it's so corporate. It's the people that are, like I said earlier, polluting, the people that are contributing to the fossil fuel industries that are here, having the conversations about how we can make it better. And it's hypocritical and it's ironic in the saddest of ways. I think it's going to need to come from kind of grassroots. That's my personal opinion. I think, I saw a great protest yesterday, like protesting, marching, kind of trying to spread the word in such a way that this entire framework can shift and we can hear from everyday people, and that these people, there could be maybe a democratic, in an ideal world, wouldn't it be great if it was a democratic policy and we could all vote on what we want rather than the decisions not actually really being made by us. But I think we do have power even when we feel we don't. And I think it does just start with speaking and sharing our thoughts with others. And hopefully we can get to a point, and I know there is not much time at all, but hopefully we can get to a point where the power is more with us and less with the people who might say they're going to do great things, but we know sadly probably not. Anyone else? No? No? Okay. Thank you. Really good question. James, have you got one?
Yes, I do. One from the chat from Claire. What to you has been the most important thing you've learned during this process? The most important thing you've learned during the process?
Anyone else got? I might need to think about it. Anyone else got a thought? Yeah?
So I think through this process, the ability to unlearn and relearn. I'm literally an agricultural student, so there's a lot I know, but I've had to unlearn some things and relearn some things in this process. So I just feel you're never too far gone or too informed to know. You're never too informed to know more or to know better. So that's the most important thing I've learned. There's so many situations where I've had moments like, in the process, I actually thought this was that, that's crazy, and then there's a switch in my mind, and then consciousness is turned on, I now know that this is what it is. And the moment it changes again, I recapitalize that knowledge, I change it again. So it's just the consciousness of knowing you're never too informed to know more or know better. So I think, so I think that was the most important thing for me, yeah. And, where the knowledge is coming from, it doesn't necessarily matter. When I say matter, it doesn't necessarily have to be from the greatest of sources. You can literally learn from anyone and anything, it's because I've never met these people before this, and I've learned so much from them. So don't be too proud to accept knowledge. You have to be open enough. You have to be open-minded. Open-mindedness is very important in this process. You cannot even get to the story of self, because how would you acknowledge that a challenge is there or something has been created if you're not open-minded? So it's a process of being very open-minded and then unlearning, relearning from any source of information that's coming to you. So you have to have that sieve, to sieve out, this can go in, this can come out, this can change. And I think that's just been the most important thing for me.
Thank you, Orly. Great answer. Anyone else? Yes, Mark?
I think I would say education was, learning new things was very much important for me, being a part of this process. But another thing was collaboration. So the fact that this is participatory and we want so many people's voices heard, we don't want to exclude nobody, because again, we live in a very diverse, I live in a diverse community. able to, when you're speaking to people, you want to make it relatable as much as possible. So obviously, like, any messages that you want to put across is not lost in translation. But again, just collaborating with as many people, for me, it felt like that was a big thing that I had to learn, because I'm that sort of person where I like working in isolation sometimes. I feel like, oh, I can do this myself. I don't really need no one to help me with X, Y, Z. But I know that you need to, there's people, if you wanna get specific knowledge or information, you might have to tap into with somebody else and pull some of that wisdom and knowledge from them. So it's just being open-minded as well is really important. You have to, if not, you won't feel like you feel like you know everything. And it's like, there's more learning along this journey. I've never claimed to, you can never know too much, more or less. So, and I think collaboration is one of those ways you can unlock another bits of information, or just something that you really wanted to know or wasn't made aware to you at that moment in time. But just through collaborating and speaking to other people, it just led to so much more for yourself. So that's one thing I've learned throughout this process, and it was great to be amongst so many great people. And even up until now, I just want to continue this journey of learning and collaboration. Hopefully there might be another opportunity to be involved in a project like this, whether it's my own side project or it's something that feedback is willing to work on with myself. But yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. So yeah, if there's any more questions, of course we can maybe one or two could potentially answer it.
Oh wait. Okay. I think we're going to have to end it there before we get kicked out. Thank you so much to everyone for coming, and we really hope you've taken something away from this. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please feel free to come find us and ask us. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, make some noise.